The hearing will come to order, and good afternoon to everyone. This hearing on the UN Relief and Works Agency, or UNRWA, its decades-long complicity in the most vicious forms of anti-Semitism, anti-Semitic hate, with a focus today on the so-called independent review by Ms. Catherine Colonna, will come to order. Hillel Neuer, Executive Director of UN Watch, will testify today that the, quote, Colonna review was not independent. The verdict was determined in advance. Mr. Neuer, the floor is yours.
Chairman Smith, thank you for inviting me to testify at this important hearing. It means a lot because there are others who seek to disinvite me. Indeed, here in Washington on Monday, I was invited and a confirmed speaker in a panel debate at the Stimson Center. One of the witnesses who was scheduled to appear here, Andrew Hyde from the Stimson Center, is one of the panelists at that debate. It's a debate about allegations of bias at UNRWA. And the panelists are William Deere, the US representative of UNRWA, who's a professional lobbyist, and a former Jordanian official, and someone from the Stimson Center. I was a confirmed speaker as well. And suddenly I received an email several days ago informing me that I was disinvited. And it turns out, I was told by Barbara Slavin of the Stimson Center, that it was UNRWA. UNRWA's Washington representative, Mr. William Deere, who said that he would not appear unless I was disinvited, and so she chose to do the dishonorable thing, and I was canceled. So it means a lot that I'm invited here. Indeed, I would say this is not the first time that UNRWA has refused to debate me. I was invited to a hearing at the European Parliament about a month ago. UNRWA was invited as well. They receive more than 100 million euro a year from the European Union. They declined to appear. So UNRWA is trying to cancel me, but the US Congress, and under your chairmanship, we are able to share the truth. So I appreciate that. Now, what I would have told the panelists at this debate here in Washington on Monday is the following. The Colonna Report, which was released just a couple weeks ago, is, we're told, an independent audit that has given UNRWA a clean bill of health, exonerating the agency of all charges of its ties with terrorism. This headline was repeated around the world and was used by several countries to reinstate funding. There's one problem, though, Mr. Chairman. These claims are completely false. Let's examine each one. First, as you intimated, the notion that this was an independent audit is questionable at best. We know first how it began. This began by UNRWA itself. The Commissioner General of UNRWA, Mr. Philippe Lazzarini, decided in January, it's actually before the revelations of UNRWA employees engaging in terrorism, but in response to our revelations and some others about UNRWA incitement on social media, on the Telegram chat group of 3,000 UNRWA teachers that we exposed who celebrated the October 7th attacks. In response to all of these, Commissioner Lazzarini decided to initiate some kind of a review. And when doing so, he told the press that these claims about UNRWA's terror ties were, quote, disingenuous, politically motivated, and constituted a, quote, smear campaign. So the same head of UNRWA, who was setting up the inquiry at the same time, he characterized the allegations as a smear campaign. In doing so, he irreparably tainted the credibility of the inquiry. Now, he went on to select particular individuals. He selected Catherine Colonna, the former foreign minister of France. That's not accidental that he chose her, just because just weeks earlier, she had tweeted a message out to him, to the public, praising UNRWA and saying how their work is more necessary than ever. This is days after we exposed the terrorgram, 3,000 UNRWA teachers in a group that celebrated the October 7th attacks. Madame Colonna was praising UNRWA. So he chose someone who he knew very well was sympathetic to UNRWA, to say the least. She was also basically a board member of UNRWA because she sat on the advisory commission, as France sat on the advisory commission. France is the 4th largest donor. So the notion that she would make adverse findings against UNRWA is absurd. She would have been implicating herself had she done so in a very significant way. So she was chosen deliberately to give the predetermined result. And indeed, as you indicated, Mr. Chairman, the the heads of the United Nations and of UNRWA told us exactly, they said it in their own words, what the report was all about. Indeed, the former spokesman for UNRWA, Chris Gunness, who now acts as a surrogate, he appeared on Al Jazeera, and he said the following. He said that the report by the former French foreign minister, quote, will provide the donors with further cover, if that's what they need, with their own internal constituencies to resume funding for UNRWA. So he said the quiet part out loud. And then the Secretary General's spokesman said the point of the report is to, quote, reassure the donors. And indeed, Colonna herself said that the point of her report was to allow donors to regain confidence where they have lost it or when they have doubt. So the whole point, it was fixed, Mr. Chairman. The Colonna Review Group from the beginning was fixed. I'll just mention briefly the other members. There were 3 Scandinavian institutes that were chosen. None was chosen by accident. Each of them is an ardent supporter of UNRWA. Groups that have accused Israel of genocide and apartheid. And, you know, there's one group called the Christian Michelson Institute. This is a group that has published a major report on UNRWA just 2 years ago, where they said that claims of UNRWA incitement are, quote, unfounded. So they picked groups that have a long record of attacking any reports of UNRWA incitement. And they chose another group called the Raoul Wallenberg Institute, which is a beautiful name named after someone who rescued Jews. But in fact, the head of this institute is the complete opposite of Raoul Wallenberg. His name is Per Lundberg, and he tweets out posts by the Electronic Intifada, which is an anti-Semitic group headed by Ali Abunimah. And he posted in 2014, must-see debate about UNRWA video. UNRWA's Chris Gunness demolishes anti-Palestinian activist on Fox. He has shared other tweets by Chris Gunness with UNRWA talking points attacking critics of UNRWA. So they deliberately picked individuals and groups that have a lengthy record of attacking any critics of UNRWA. So this was the least objective kind of group you could imagine. So in truth, this was not an independent audit. Those who created the review and the people who were selected indicate that it was fixed from the start. And in the large part, the review group provided the goods. The report says the following: UNRWA, quote, remains pivotal in providing life-saving humanitarian aid. UNRWA is irreplaceable and indispensable, a humanitarian lifeline. Mr. Chairman, we didn't need to have an independent review group of the French foreign minister and 3 Scandinavian institutes to produce those lines. Those words are the official UNRWA talking points. We have a video coming out soon where you will see dozens and dozens of ambassadors and other public officials, including sometimes from the US State Department, parroting these lines: life-saving, irreplaceable, lifeline, indispensable, over and over and over again. These are the UNRWA talking points. So to read the Guardian headline, Mehdi Hassan, who's an anti-Israel columnist on May 2nd in The Guardian, he used these words and this report to attack critics of UNRWA. He said, it shows the critics were all wrong, all spreading lies, all peddling Israeli propaganda. So this is how the report was used. It doesn't mean there aren't things in here that are useful. And I saw from Mr. Lindsay's testimony, there are certain things in here, despite the conclusions that they reached, which enabled Germany and Japan and others, indeed, that gave them the cover to resume funding. There are, of course, some things in the report that are useful. But, you know, this comes to the point that some of the myths about the report, the myth that we hear so often is no evidence was provided. Israel has never provided any evidence, we're told, about UNRWA complicity with terrorism. I'll quote from The Guardian on April 22nd, quote, Israel has yet to provide evidence of UNRWA staff terrorist links, says the Colonna Report. This was shared by Ken Roth, the former head of Human Rights Watch, and many, many others. Now, the interesting thing here, no evidence was provided, is that Colonna herself, even though I'm critical of her, but Colonna herself refuted that claim. When she presented her report in New York on April 22nd, she said the following. She said, some of these media quotes do not respect the text of the report. We've written UNRWA has not received evidence by Israel, not that there is no evidence. It's very different. These are 2 separate missions. Allegations regarding individuals is in the scope of the OIOS, That's the oversight agency. It's under their mission, she said. It's not the scope of our mandate. And she said it's no surprise that Israel did not provide evidence to UNRWA because it doesn't owe this evidence. These are her words. It doesn't owe this evidence during the OIOS investigation to UNRWA, but only to the OIOS. So even though Colonna herself said that it's perfectly normal that Israel didn't give you the evidence to UNRWA, and they are giving it to OIOS, and Israel is cooperating, she said, with OIOS, which has returned to Israel a second time, and is investigating not only 12, but even more alleged UNRWA perpetrators. So the notion that Israel failed to provide evidence is false. Now, the other conclusion that they provided in the report that, and I'm quoting here, UNRWA has established a significant number of policies, mechanisms, and procedures to ensure compliance with a more developed approach to neutrality than any other similar UN or NGO entities, end quote. Really, Mr. Chairman, UNRWA is the best agency in the world, we're told, when it comes to compliance, when you and I know, and anyone who's seen the evidence know that the truth is the complete opposite. And when I read this, I thought, as others have, of Stalin's constitution. The truth is that Stalin's constitution, if you read the provisions, there are dozens of articles in the Soviet Union constitution that speak about direct election and freedom of conscience and all kinds of freedoms. But the reality was the complete opposite. You know, he adopted this constitution in 1936, right before the Great Terror, the Great Purge. The reality was the complete opposite in the Soviet Union. And yet it was proclaimed when his constitution came out as the most democratic in the world. That was the Soviet propaganda line. So the fact that UNRWA may have all kinds of procedures and mechanisms may entirely be true. But you and I know, Mr. Chairman, that the reality is the complete opposite. The reality is that we just saw days ago UNRWA vehicles driving around in Gaza next to gunmen, terrorists, coming in and out of the UNRWA vehicles. We know that it wasn't that long ago, a couple of months ago, when Israel exposed a terror tunnel directly underneath UNRWA headquarters in Gaza, and the terror tunnel had computer servers. It was a Hamas spy center, computer servers with electric cables going directly from the terror tunnel, from the Hamas computers into UNRWA headquarters, getting their electricity directly from UNRWA. And when Mr. Lazzarini in February was asked about this, his response on Twitter was, quote, "We do not know what is under UNRWA's headquarters. We do not know what's under UNRWA headquarters." But Mr. Chairman, a week before, the Wall Street Journal reported that 10 years prior, in 2014, folks at UNRWA had noticed that the parking lot was sinking. The parking lot was sinking. No one said anything. They knew exactly what it was about, but everybody knew. Wall Street Journal. No one said anything, everyone was silent, but everyone knew. Of course they knew. The only major construction project in Gaza was hundreds and hundreds of miles of terror tunnels. Next to my house in Geneva, they were building a massive tunnel for a train. We knew about it for a few years. Everyone at UNRWA knew what was going on, but everyone was silent. So the UNRWA line that they had no idea is simply not credible. No evidence of UNRWA terrorism. We exposed in January the 3,000 UNRWA teachers who belonged to the Terrorgram group that celebrated the October 7th attacks. We've exposed for 9 years, we've exposed UNRWA teachers and school principals who regularly praise Hitler, people like Elham Mansour, a teacher in Lebanon, who said, "By Allah, every Muslim must slaughter the Jews." She's an UNRWA teacher. Now, these aren't a few bad apples. UNRWA said it's a few bad apples. I'm just going to mention a few people. There's Su'ail al-Hindi. People think that the head of UNRWA is a nice Swiss guy named Philippe Lazzarini, and he's a great, very effective spokesperson telling lies about UNRWA. The truth is, I don't think he has any idea what's going on at UNRWA. He doesn't run things. The people who run things are people like Su'ail al-Hindi. He was the chief of the UNRWA staff union in Gaza for years, and in 2011, when UNRWA was embarrassed and suspended him, he mobilized Hamas. He's actually a member of Hamas. He was suspended because of his relations with Hamas. Hamas mobilized 8,000 UNRWA teachers. The entire staff of UNRWA went on strike in Gaza for months. They shut down 243 schools. 220,000 students were out of school to rally for months behind a Hamas Politburo member. Su'ail al-Hindi sits on the Hamas Politburo in Gaza with Yahya Sinwar, the master terrorist. And for years, he sat as the head of the UNRWA union. Eventually, because it became public, he had to resign. UNRWA didn't fire him, but they asked him to resign. So as far as I know, he's still collecting an UNRWA pension. And he's a leader of Hamas, celebrating the attacks, leading the Great March of Return. And there are several other examples in our reports, which can all be found at unwatch.org, repeatedly, when UNRWA teachers are exposed for their incitement. Thousands of UNRWA staff, whether it's in Gaza or in Lebanon, rally in their support. It's not a few bad apples. The rot goes all the way to the core. And the Colonna Report, sadly, misrepresents the situation in UNRWA. We know for 10 years that we've been sending them all of these reports. The response of UNRWA was to attack us. We've posted on the internet, on our website, unwatch.org, example after example of how we wrote to UNRWA, tried to engage, they refused to meet us, like the UNRWA representative here in Washington is trying to cancel me, and instead all they did was attack us. That's the truth, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much.
Mr. Neuer, could you tell us, was UNRWA a reliable agency where the money that we provided for across the board was being utilized effectively?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And let me just say that since I last appeared here, the U.S. Congress has passed bipartisan legislation signed by the President, which prohibits any funding of UNRWA for at least the next year. And I want to congratulate you for your leadership in making this happen. It's a very significant move. Regarding aid, we are told that we need to give money to UNRWA to help the Gazans who do need help. And of course, it's our position that the Gazans should be helped in every way possible. The question is whether UNRWA is the right one. And we just released a report last week on May 8th, whereby it's on our website, unwatch.org, and was widely reported. UNRWA staff are stealing aid. They're selling it for profit, while those who report it face reprisals. This is based on numerous reports that have been published by Palestinians in Gaza in an UNRWA-related chat room. There's a former UNRWA official who runs a chat room, and there's, I'll just read out some of the reports that were made from Gazans. A gentleman named Dr. Izzat Shatat says, open thefts from UNRWA shelter workers. The director of a school warehouse came with 50 cartons of food, distributed in UNRWA schools, and he sold them to a merchant for $100 per carton. How did he take out this amount of cartons? Where is the administration? So people are openly asking in this chat room, why is UNRWA not doing anything? An UNRWA staffer, Muhammad Musa al-Sawalhi, recounts abuses by UNRWA employees. 80% of employees in the shelters have no morals or dignity, he says. They have their homes full of aid, and not only them, but their loved ones with him. Someone named Dima in the chat group says, when will the directors of UNRWA centers and schools, especially Rafah Preparatory Girls School B, stop stealing the food and needs of the displaced? So these are just, Mr. Chairman, a handful of countless messages accusing, this is from Gazans, UNRWA staff, including directors, of stealing aid at the expense of Gazans who are in need. And yet for the past months, these calls by people in Gaza have fallen on deaf ears. So I think it's fair for us to ask Mr. Lazzarini, his representative here in Washington, William Deere, I don't think they agree to appear before the Congress, why, when whistleblowers are saying nothing has been done, what is UNRWA's response to this?
In the reporting and intake of allegations, I was struck by what seemed to be very laudatory language, but it lacks credibility, that all UNRWA staff and personnel have an obligation to report misconduct and, in turn, a right to be protected from retaliation from such reports. You just talked about petty theft, which when somebody is starving, taking food out of their mouth is a very serious thing. But here we're talking about other kinds of, the gross anti-Semitism, which UNRWA is known for decades, especially recently. It said there were 21 alleged breaches per year. And I looked in vain in this entire report to see what? Who made the allegation? It's almost like, turning yourself into the IRS, the Internal Revenue Service. Do you think someone's going to do that? If they bring an allegation, what happens? Do they get visited by someone who, from Hamas? What happens? There's nothing in here to indicate the disposition of these cases and whether or not there's an encouragement for whistleblowers.
Mr. Chairman, I agree the report in too many ways does not capture the reality and seems to be indifferent to reality. Indeed, in Gaza, when time and again, and this they do address maybe for the first time in an official report, that the staff unions are often run, they say, by political parties, well, terrorists. Suhail al-Hindi is a leading terrorist. He is a leader of the Hamas terrorists, fully active in leading what they're doing in massacring Israelis. He was the head of the staff union in Gaza. So the notion that someone could report him or other teachers and school principals and not face repercussions is absurd. I have to say that one of my great disappointments with the report we saw early on, the review group, there aren't very many groups that are exposing UNRWA promotion of terrorism. It's our group, a group Impact to SC, maybe one or two others at most. And they didn't reach out to us. We were part of a mass email saying you could submit something, but they didn't meet with us. Neither Madame Colonna nor any of the three groups didn't bother to meet with us, didn't ask us, since we're basically the main group that have, for 10 years, have been sending warnings about UNRWA support for terrorism, sending allegations. The natural thing would be, can you folks share your experiences? How does UNRWA respond to your allegations? They didn't contact us, and indeed we sent them a lengthy submission. It's on our website with evidence. There's no reference to it anywhere in their report. So in our experience, as you said, Mr. Chairman, the review group did not seem to be interested in really capturing the reality. They looked at superficialities, again, talking about procedures and mechanisms and policies, like the Stalinist constitution. That's not very serious.
How come we keep hearing that same refrain year after year, decade after decade? When I raised decades ago these issues, I met with the UNRWA representatives, and I got all these platitudes about how they were fixing it. And then we see time and time again, it doesn't get fixed. It actually degrades and gets worse. Why would any reasonable man or woman take any stock that this is the time? The gig, in my opinion, is up.
The notion, again, that we can go back to UNRWA, UNRWA said they immediately embrace all the reforms. This is absurd. Nothing here is new. There are some new elements that are mentioned here, but all of these things are known to UNRWA for at least a decade, and in many cases longer before. But certainly for us, since August 2015, we have been warning UNRWA about their staff promoting terrorism. And their response, I'm going to read just a few quotes from their spokesperson. When we revealed that UNRWA teachers were inciting terrorism, he says, he attacked us on Twitter, quote, UN Watch makes a fool of itself, credibility dead in the water. Will anyone believe them again? The next day, August 26, 2015, appeal to journalists. Please don't turn UN Watch baseless allegation about anti-Semitism into a he said, she said story. It's a non-story. Year after year, time and again, when we did what UNRWA failed to do, to hold to account their staff for promoting terrorism, and we saw the end result, that we have thousands of Gazans, at least half of them will be UNRWA graduates, carried out mass rape, mass murder, torture, a kidnapping of Israelis. At least half of them are going to be UNRWA graduates, and they were given these messages of hate, which we long documented. And UNRWA's response was to attack us. There's nothing in the report saying that UNRWA systematically, their leading people, attacked us for exposing promotion of terrorism. And let's go back to really what UNRWA is, as Dr. Einat Wilf has shown in her book, The War of Return, and as she has stated numerous times, support for terrorism at UNRWA is not a bug, it's a feature. The whole point of UNRWA is to tell Palestinians in Gaza, for example, and you see videos, they tell children, is your home here in Gaza? The child says, no, where's your home? Your home is in Jaffa, in Akko, in Israel. So when we, Mr. Chairman, give hundreds of millions of dollars to Gazans in cement and give them cement to build homes, hospitals, and schools, when UNRWA teaches them, your home isn't here in Gaza, we should not be surprised that they are not going to use that cement to build homes in Gaza, but to build hundreds of miles of terror tunnels, to tunnel into Israel, and to perpetrate terrorism. That is what we should expect. That is UNRWA's narrative, and the Palestinians embrace their return is not a peaceful return. We saw the Al-Aqsa flood. That is how they imagine the return, in the most violent and brutal ways. And as long as UNRWA will exist, sadly, we can expect more October 7th massacres to happen. UNRWA, the existence of UNRWA, sadly, will guarantee more grievance, resentment, hatred, and terrorism.
Is there anything any of you, yes, gentlemen, think we may have missed that you would like to convey to the committee?
Mr. Chairman, you mentioned the administration, and I was concerned that in statements made in New York and in Geneva in response to the Colonna Report, we did not hear from the administration the obvious objections that the members of the review group were not independent, that the Commissioner General, when he initiated the report, announced in advance what the outcome would be. So, and when they concluded that UNRWA is a lifeline and life-saving and irreplaceable and all the rest, that these are all long-used talking points that are clearly not the conclusion of an independent investigation. The administration should be saying this. The administration should be objecting, but they didn't. They said they took it seriously, and even they told the United Nations, we're very proud. It's those who banned funding, that's the Congress, not us. We are very proud that we pushed out $121 million early on in the year in January and gave it to UNRWA. So there is a disconnect, and I wish that the administration would take the evidence seriously. The evidence is that there is widespread support for terrorism among UNRWA staff. It's UNRWA union leaders, and that UNRWA has failed to take this seriously. UNRWA has attacked groups like ours that have exposed this, and I would like the administration to hold UNRWA to account, and instead, it's not the message that we're hearing.